Counterattack! With the clone army stretched in a desperate attempt to engage General Grievous's Starfleet, separatist planets that were once thought secure are now rising up against the Republic. On Geonosis, separatist leader Pago the Lesser, safe in his newly ray-shielded factories, creates thousands of terrible new weapons, which march off the assembly line against the outnumbered clone army. The Jedi, resolute in their effort to restore order to the Republic, mount a massive invasion to retake Geonosis and shut down Pago's factories of terror once and for all.
Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mayvar Tigar? Welcome to the 58th Geonosian Droid Factory Destroying episode of Mando Vision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can also email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And since I've brought up the social medias, I just want to put it out there. Never, ever, ever will I be one of those people on Twitter who posts their rankings of the Star Wars movies. I feel like that is a move that is just designed to get attention and start fights, and I don't want to do it. If you want to email me and contact me, I'll talk about my favorites and my least favorites. But like, I don't need to poke the bear. That kind of list invariably upsets somebody. So why do it? As long as we're all liking Star Wars, that's all that really, really matters, isn't it? All right, enough of that. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, please give us those sweet, sweet, sweet 5-star reviews. They help defeat the tyranny of the algorithm. It's just like the Empire and needs to be brought down a peg or two. Probably all the way, let's be honest. And they really help the small independent podcasts like us stand out and not get lost in the shuffle. Well, welcome back. We're back to the Clone Wars. We're here to revisit our rewatch of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. One of our favorite things ever is talking about the Clone Wars. It's such a fun show. And this episode today is no exception. We're here for Season 2, Episode 5, Landing at Point Rain. The original air date on this was November 4th, 2009. And it's quite the episode. It's one that I definitely... my memories of it are a little fuzzy from when I first watched it, so long ago. And going back to see this episode was a lot of fun. Parts of it came back to me in a flash. But I think the most striking thing with this episode is just it's very heavily action-oriented. But in a way that is so very George Lucas and so very Star Wars. This episode is very much the Star Wars, Clone Wars equivalent of watching an old World War II movie, the type of film that George Lucas would have grown up watching, and has inspired a lot of the takes and the visuals from the Clone Wars, and a lot of those, we see that in the prequels, especially the influence of old World War II movies on Lucas in the prequels with the ship designs and the similar visual aesthetics that maybe you think, oh, I kind of see where that's like a B-52 or whatever. You get a lot of that from Lucas in the prequel trilogy that carries throughout into the Star Wars: The Clone Wars cartoon. And this episode to me very much feels like a love letter directly to the World War II movies of his childhood. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. There's a lot of really great World War II movies from that era, and they pay homage to a lot of them in this episode. So we're gonna get into it. We're gonna give it the breakdown, and this may not be the most dialogue-heavy episode that I do. You know how I like to kind of sneak in some clips from the show here and there. There's not as many to get into in this episode because it is a lot of just action sequences, and as this is an audio format podcast, as many podcasts are. You don't need to hear blaster fire and lightsabers swooshing in the air. So it may be a little minimal on audio clips today, but we're still gonna make it a fun show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. So let's get into it. But before we do that, one more piece of business to take care of. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
You're late. Sorry, Master. Ahsoka and I were busy routing the Seppies near Doran.
My squadron alone had 55 kills.
Yeah, but mine had 76.
Show off.
Well, I'm glad you two are enjoying yourselves.
Hey, it's just a little friendly competition, Master. Nothing to worry about.
What I worry about is the way this war seems to be drawing out, with no end in sight.
Which is why it is crucial our invasion of Geonosis meets with success.
As I said earlier, this is Season 2, Episode 5, Landing at Point Rain, original air date November 4th, 2009. Our plot for this episode, Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Ki-Adi-Mundi lead a landing party to destroy a droid factory on Geonosis. That very droid factory we learned about in the previous episode, Senate Spy. All right, this episode is directed by Brian O'Connell, who's just been killing it on this show. So fantastic. The episode is written by Brian Larson with Drew Z. Greenberg as the supervising writer. Our voice cast today: Matt Lanter's Anakin Skywalker, Brian George as Ki-Adi-Mundi, D. Bradley Baker as the Clone Troopers, Captain Rex, Commander Cody, Waxer Boyle, and Commander Jet. Ashley Eckstein as Ahsoka Tano, James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, Tom Kane as the narrator, Yoda and Admiral Yularen. Olivia Dabo has a small cameo here as Luminara Unduli. Terrence T.C. Carson steps in to be Mace Windu. Ian Abercrombie is Chancellor Palpatine, and Matthew Wood takes over once again as the battle droids. So we got, like I said, this is a really intense, action-packed episode of the show. But before we kind of dive into the episode, I did want to spend a little time talking about one of my favorite characters in this episode. He's popped up in previous episodes of the Clone Wars, and obviously we recognize him from the prequel trilogies. We're talking about, of course, about Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, and listen, he has what we would like to say, us old fans. He has a lot of forgotten history about him, and I kind of wanted to share a little bit of that with you because again, if you go onto Wikipedia and you just look on the canon tab, Ki is a relatively blank canvas as far as that goes. A lot of the stuff they reference are events from this series, from the animated Clone Wars series and the movies, and that's kind of all the Ki-Adi-Mundi stuff you get that is considered to be canon about the character. Now, I know I do that old man thing where I talk about days of yesteryear and then ye old times. But back in ye old times, before the acquisition of Star Wars by Disney, when we had the expanded universe going full force, we had Dark Horse with the comic book license, and we had the multitude of novels hitting the shelves. Dark Horse, in particular, did a fantastic job of helping flesh out Ki-Adi-Mundi as a Jedi and a character. He was the star of their recently launched Star Wars comic book that came out shortly after The Phantom Menace. I want to say after The Phantom Menace came out. It might have been right before. But I think they probably timed it to coincide with the two things. But the early issues of that series were set prior to the events of The Phantom Menace, excuse me. And again, Ki was sort of the star of this book, and we got to know a lot about him, and he had a really unique backstory. He was a Syrian Jedi from the planet Sarah. I know I'm saying it wrong because you read it 1,000 times and you know how to say it in your brain, but your brain might be saying it wrong, and then you have to hear like Lucas say it in a movie for you to know if you're saying it correctly. It's spelled Cerea. All right, so that's where he's from. That part seems to hold. One of the big differences with the canon version of Ki versus his Legends version is this version we know in the Clone Wars seems to have what they call a binary brain, which allows him to observe things from multiple advantage points, I guess is the right way to say that. He's able to sort of have like a 360-degree view of every situation he finds himself in. He's able to look at both sides of things, not just his own, I suppose. And that's an interesting thing. I think they explore that a little bit here in the Clone Wars show, so I don't want to say too much about it right now. That wasn't really part of his deal in the old canon. But what I thought was really cool and really interesting, and what I thought might sort of dovetail into events with Anakin, later in the film series, and by the time we get to the Clone Wars, is um, he, because of his people, they have real big problems with birth rates, with birth rates and survival rates of infants on their planet. So Ki-Adi-Mundi has a sort of exemption from the Jedi Order, so that he is allowed to be married and have children in order to help his species survive. And I've always thought that was something that would be really interesting, when Anakin gets to the point where he has to live a secret life and be married to Padme in secret. And but they never get to that. That never comes to fruition because that never pays off in anything other than the lore in the comics. It never gets brought up in the Clone Wars. It never gets brought up in any of the films. But it was one of those really unique things that I thought would be, oh wow, this is such a really great thing to kind of compare and contrast Anakin as he progresses through his story. To have a character like Ki-Adi-Mundi, a respected, revered, Jedi Master on the Jedi High Council, who has this permission slip basically to go out there and have kids and live that life. Now, Ki does try to obey some of the basic fundamentals of the Jedi Code. He tries to keep emotional distance from these children. He views it more of like his duty, his responsibility to help ensure his species survival. But yeah, he's like, I think he has like 5 wives in the comics, 5 wives and like 7 kids or something like that. It's really interesting stuff, and it's one of those angles on the character that I always thought was really, really, again, like I said, I thought it would be really interesting to again, to compare and contrast with Anakin. And here it is, I have it written down. It's 5 wives and 7 children. But again, he did try to keep some emotional detachment, kind of keep that Jedi aloofness about the whole situation. But again, sometimes you throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the saying goes. So when all this stuff went to Disney, out went the Dark Horse continuity. Basically, they all started from scratch, and the only piece of canon that we really have about Ki-Adi-Mundi is right here in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. But again, a neat Jedi. I've always liked his look, the kind of a conical head of his with like the white wisp of hair coming out the top. And I always liked the way he was sort of portrayed in the films. I liked, even though he's wrong, egregiously wrong, every time he talks in the movies, he is so wrong. When Qui-Gon says, he believes he was attacked by a Sith on Tatooine, and it's Ki who's like, the Sith have been gone for a millennium or something like that. And then in episode 2, he says something along the lines that oh, excuse me, I keep wanting to say Darth Tyrannus, but he doesn't call him Tyrannus. He's just Dooku, Count Dooku. He's not capable of violence and murder because he used to be a Jedi Knight. And that's sort of like an example of that binary brain of his, but it's just also an example of that binary brain not making him any smarter than anybody else because he's just dead wrong. Dead wrong. And then we see Ki-Adi-Mundi. We see him meet his final fate in episode 3 with the execution of Order 66, where he's killed by his clone trooper forces on Megiddo. And so full circle with that guy. And then if you really want to get into some more deep lore with that character, his lightsaber comes into play in several of the new Marvel comic books, in the Black Spire books in particular, and then in a fashion at Disneyland now. If you make it to Star Wars Land and you're at the Black Spire outpost, Ki-Adi-Mundi's lightsaber is supposedly there on display. So enjoy that piece of knowledge. But hey, we're not here for the Ki-Adi-Mundi hour. We're here to talk about landing at Point Rain. So let's get into it.
No, sir. I wasn't involved in the first assault on Geonosis.
Well, you didn't miss much. Last time I was chained to a pole and attacked by several humongous monsters.
That sounds entertaining.
It was. For the Genosians.
All right. Hey, listen. I got one more thing to say about Ki-Adi-Mundi. If you do go back and kind of revisit those old Dark Horse comics, Marvel still publishes them. They are still collected. They just have that gold Legends banner on them. You'll notice in the second arc of that Star Wars series that Dark Horse put out that writer-artist extraordinaire Tim Truman comes on board to lead the next adventure of Ki-Adi-Mundi. and it's a mission that takes him to Tatooine, again, before the events of the Phantom Menace, where he has to find a missing Jedi, a Jedi named Sharad Het. And what we discover on this incredibly well, just beautiful art by Tim Truman. It's a wonderful story too. But we find a Jedi who had walked away from the Order and became a Tusken Raider voluntarily. You'll see why. I mean, that's all in the story there. I don't want to give too much away in case you do go back to reread it, but a really wonderful story there, and I recommend that one highly. With that all being said, this episode in particular, we talked about it very much an homage to the World War II movies of yesteryear, Battle of the Bulge, those kind of things. And just extremely action-packed, intense, a lot of really wonderful combat visuals in this episode, from that open staging area, where you get I don't know, you just sort of see the ships descend, begin their attack, and the aerial assault aspect of this beginning opening combat sequence, with the Republic ships, attempting to get to the landing zone, attempting to get to their staging area, and just being under such heavy fire. Again, like this is such a callback to the World War II movies of way back when, and it's very intense. It's very powerful. You're watching clones and the ships they're in just being blown out of the sky, and the Geonosians are animated with such intensity in their faces as they are protecting their home world from what they perceive to be these invaders, and it's hard to not be struck by that intensity. Again, as we're just watching clones just get blown out of the sky, you're basically defenseless when you're in these ships. There's some offensive capabilities, but when you're under this barrage of fire from the ground, you are, specifically for the troopers that are, just being there for the transport. I mean, there's nothing they can really do about it. They're just hoping they can get to that landing zone, and then give them a fighting chance, to see if they can survive the battle or not. But when you're just in the belly of those ships, that's got to be a really intense moment. I mean, even for these clones who are born and bred for battle. But I mean, that's got to be a tad nerve-wracking to just kind of be waiting to see what happens. And again, we talked about the ground fire from the Geonosians, and of course, it's a very effective way in which they combat the Republic's landing forces. All three Jedis crash land onto the planet of Geonosis. They're all separated from each other. Obi-Wan and his forces in particular are very, very pinned down where they crash. And that leads to some stuff later on where we get to meet up with Waxer and Boyle again, who you may remember from episode 20 of season 1, The Innocents of Ryloth. They're the ones that find the small Twi'lek girl, and then they take her around, and eventually they all link back up with Obi-Wan. Well, we get Waxer and Boyle again, and this time they come to Obi-Wan's rescue as his ship is, stuck under fire, and they're unable to escape from it. And Obi-Wan's a little banged up, a little worse for the wear on that one. Waxer and Boyle come to his rescue at the order of Commander Cody. Commander Cody's so dedicated, so loyal. Well, we know how that turns out. But it's really cool, and again, I'm gonna say it again. I mean, it's sort of like that classic thing. The Allied forces are invading Europe. The Germans are repelling them with the ground fire. The forces are scattered, and then they have to come back together to lead the assault that was the plan to begin with. And that's exactly what this episode is. And it's neat. It's really cool. You get Anakin and Ahsoka and Rex. Their forces come up to a giant fortress that they had thought they were going to be able to get around. Assuming they were going to be able to land in the right landing zone. But now they have to figure out how to scale this wall, this fortress, and blow it up and get to the other side. Again, it's all about linking the forces back up again so they can lead this assault, because they have to stop this droid factory. That's the mission. That's the objective. Trying to retake Geonosis and put these droid factories out of commission once and for all. Again, lots of good stuff in here. Ki Adamundi is leading his forces. He takes them down this really scary, passageway. Where me visually, I'm looking at him like, don't go in there. Don't go in there. So, not a surprise when the Geonosians pop out of the wall and start picking off clone troopers left and right. And that's an element of this episode that is not to be overlooked as well. You get that sort of horror element of like these Geonosians swooping down and just picking up clone troopers and flying off with them to who knows where, to do God knows what to them. Eat their heads or drop them off a cliff, or whatever it is they're going to do to them. It's just a horrific way to die. And the screams that you hear from these troopers, D. Bradley Baker selling it. Like, these troopers know this is no way to go out. And so there's a really nice horror element to this episode as well, in that cavern scene in particular. But I mean, I guess if you wanted to paint that with broad strokes, I mean, it's all the horrors of war in this one as well. One of the highlights of this episode for me is, well, actually, I mean, let me, before I get to the highlight here, let me talk to you real quick about this. This show in particular is not shy with violence on multiple occasions, which is interesting because it is a Star Wars show, and there is obviously that children's element that kids are probably watching this. This was on the Cartoon Network, and it was played later in the evenings, but not that late in the evenings. This wasn't like Adult Swim or anything like that. But the violence in this episode in particular, you do have to pay attention to it. I mean, Ki-Adi-Mundi calls in flame troopers, and they're just torching Geonosians all over the place, and it's interesting. I sort of had to wonder, is this just because they look like bugs that we can just do this? I mean, they are a sentient species, right? And we're just watching them get torched. It was wild. I mean, listen, it's war. The horrors of war. I said it before. It's right there on Front Street. But I sort of wonder, like, would we have seen this? Would they have been able to get away with this if this was more if this was like the clone troopers being burned out with flamethrowers? Now, don't get me wrong. We see plenty of clone troopers die horrible deaths in this show. I just don't remember any of them being lit on fire like that. That was something else. I was like, whoa, that was pretty intense. All right, eventually our forces do get back together, and it leads to one of my favorite sequences in this episode, a real highlight of Brian O'Connell's direction in this one. Before I do want to talk about it, I also want to give a shout out to Kevin Kinnear for the score, because the music in this episode is also fantastically done. They do a really nice job. Again, it's a cartoon, it's animated. You think there's a sort of a children's element to it all, but this episode is so intense, and it's so quickly paced, and the music helps sell that so much that you would be hard pressed to have an episode that gets your heart beating as much as this one does without that really great score in place. So big shout out on this episode. I mean, the music's great on this series overall, but in this episode it really helps deliver on that intensity that you want to have as you're watching it, as you're kind of feeling what your heroes are going through. So again, this gets to my favorite sequence, which is Anakin leading the charge, leading through the shield there, and it's this big, long, sweeping camera view angle. Just follows Anakin as he and his troopers are just charging in to the heart of this droid factory. So not the heart of the factory itself, but to the entrance, and they're under fire, and it's just awesome. Again, the World War II element is right there. This is like a World War II movie with Jedi Knights, and that's a kind of a fun idea right there. And they really get to do it in this episode, and I think it really delivers in a lot of areas. So big stuff here. We get to the classic part of this episode. Oh, actually, I did jump ahead. I wanted to mention Obi-Wan's forces being pinned down by the Geonosian forces, and it looks like they're going to have to brace to make their final stand. And Obi-Wan reluctantly, battered, beaten, holding his ribs, gets up, activates his lightsaber, like, this is it. This is the Alamo for me. And that's when you get that classic World War II homage of the air support coming in to save the day and just bomb the living bejesus out of those forces. That's you might know that quote, but again, it's a wonderful homage to that genre of films. We've seen that movie before, where our heroes, our soldiers are facing overwhelming odds, defeat looms, it's imminent, and then the airstrike comes in, and the air support comes in, and they drop the bombs, and they get those forces and give them a chance to fight their way back out of things. And that's exactly what happens here. And that is how our three Jedis reunite, I should say, which then leads to Anakin's wonderful charge sequence, which, again, I really enjoyed. Whew! And again, because this episode is so action-packed and so quickly paced, there's not a lot to really dissect here. There's not a lot of information to parse or clues to dissect future events from. I did think it was rather interesting. I had sort of conflicted feelings about Anakin and Ahsoka having sort of like the running kill count. And I guess the only reason why I ultimately don't think it's a big deal is because like they're just killing droids. But I think it'd be odd for Jedi to be counting their kills of sentient beings. So again, they're only killing droids. So I guess that's not that big a deal. But it was just something that kind of struck me as a little interesting. And like, would this have played as well? Well, no. I guess they're killing Geonosians too, aren't they? I don't know. Yeah, maybe that just rubs me as a little dark. Maybe that's just a little dark. But as we see with the final clip of the episode, Ki-Adi-Mundi not above playing that game as well.
I'll never understand how you can simplify these battles into some kind of game.
Well, take care of yourselves. I expect to see both of you back here by the time I've destroyed the main factory.
We shall do our best.
65, Skywalker.
Sorry?
My total, 65. So what do I win?
My everlasting respect, Master Mundi.
Oh,
That is a gift Anakin rarely bestows, I assure you.
We're about to wrap up, but I did neglect one thing. In the battle, when Anakin and Ahsoka are on top of the wall with Rex and they're attempting to blow that wall up, I do like the sequence there where Rex is able to sneak through the droideca's shields and blast its head off, and then Anakin does a similar move where he slides underneath the droideca's shields and it lightsabers him in half. That is a really cool sequence, and I also liked it when they chucked Rex off the wall using the Force. And he just said, "Just next time, just let me jump." And Anakin's like, "Nope, that's not as much fun." So I wanted to shout that out a little bit too. I thought that was a really cool sequence. This episode is rock solid. It's 8.5. The action, the intensity, that final charge that Anakin makes at the end with his troopers is so well done, so well shot. The music is pitch perfect in this episode. 8.5, easy episode to watch and enjoy. And this episode kind of kicks off, the next 4 or 5 episodes in the season. So yeah, we're gonna be back covering those, breaking those down, and it gets weird. There's some weird stuff coming up in these Geonosis episodes. So get ready. Just keep your bucket on, especially when you see what's coming like 2 or 3 episodes down the line. You're gonna want your bucket on real tight for those ones. Oh boy. All right. Well, listen, we're gonna wrap this up. We're gonna get out of here. Again, you know the format by now. On Fridays, we're doing our Bad Batch coverage, and then on Mondays, we are typically dropping new episodes of our Star Wars Clone Wars rewatch, though we are sprinkling in some new content, some different content on Mondays as well. You may have noticed the Ewoks Caravan of Courage made its way into the feed last week, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And at some point, we're going to sneak the Battle for Endor into your feed as well, and that'll probably drop on a Monday as well. Just because I don't want to give you guys 1,000 podcasts to listen to during the week. Maybe I'm making a mistake by not doing that. But yeah, every now and again we might supplement a Monday Clone War episode with something like Caravan of Courage and Battle for Endor, and we are going to get to the Gennady Tartakovsky Clone War series as well. So I mean that might just be sprinkled in on Mondays for the time being, because Bad Batch is going to keep us pretty busy on Fridays. So yeah, it's fun to mix it up a little bit. That's going to keep it fresh. Going to keep it real fresh. And I know how fresh you all like your podcasts. All right, so thank you so much for listening to this independent Star Wars podcast. Mandovision, that's our name. Make sure you follow us on social media. Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And I am Tom. I am the host of Mandovision. Thank you for listening. We would not be here without all the support we can get from all you fine listeners who take the time to download, listen, and engage with us on social media. That is one of my favorite things about the show is having the engagement and talking to people. We're talking about Star Wars, man. That's such a good feeling to talk about Star Wars with people who enjoy it as much as you do. It's a real thrill, a real treat, a real delight. So with that being said, next time you hear us, yeah, it's going to be Bad Batch time, and I hope you guys are enjoying, guys and gals, excuse me, or maybe I should just keep it gender neutral. I hope everyone is enjoying that show as much as I am. And I don't know what else to say. I don't want to say too much about the Bad Batch on here, just in case people aren't watching that as quickly. So yeah, we're gonna keep that. We're gonna keep that conversation to those episodes specifically. But just keep your bucket on. That's the best way to do things. All right, let's get out of here. Let's wrap it up. My name is Tom. This is the Mendivision Podcast, and this podcast can only end one way. And this is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.